Hello and welcome to Find Your Freedom, a podcast dedicated to helping you truly find freedom in all aspects of life. Join your hosts and their expert guests as they share practical tips and strategies for finding more freedom in your life. It's time to take control of your life and create the future you want. Let's find your freedom. Here are your hosts, Lenny the Boss and Omid Rad Investor.
Boom, 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 man. We are back at Find Your Freedom with another amazing episode. But before we jump into this, you know, we always have something that's going to help you out, help you in your journey. So it's easily downloadable. Just go to findyourfreedom, REI.com/freedom kit. Once again, Find Your Freedom, REI.com/freedom kit. Go get your downloadable. It's going to sit there and help you get to where you need to go. Now, listen, you're going to want to really tune in. So turn up the volume, all right? Because we got our guy here, man. He's a real estate investor, short-term rentals, long-term rentals, buy and holder, which I love, all right? You know, he's a financial independent advocate and educator, okay? You know, he's all about the generational wealth. He like to call it generational fire. Whoa, I love that, man. You know, and he lives by this key, which means everything right here, okay? So listen up. Take consistent daily action, all right? So with that being said, we got our boy Kyle with us. Kyle Healy, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, man, we're feeling absolutely amazing. So, Kyle, for the listeners, please let them know. Give them a little background on yourself.
Absolutely. So, I like to call myself a husband, father, real estate investor, and software engineer. I also served in the Army Reserve, and that's a big point of where my story begins. 18 doors that I've acquired in the last 2.5 years, coming back from my deployment. And everything I do is that I can spend more time with my family. So that's a kind of quick, short, and sweet on what I got going on, and I'm happy to dive into some more of it as we go.
All right, so 18 doors in 2.5 years. I mean, most people won't have 18 doors in a lifetime. So let's start with that. Like, you know, what got you into the real estate space?
Absolutely. So I'm going to pull you back even farther, actually, from my deployment with the Army. So my daughter was born while I was gone. She was 4 months old when I got back, and I owned 0 doors at that point. I was just in the software space, and that transitioned from me and my wife to now being a father. It kind of gave me a little gut check, and I was like, I want to spend as much time with my daughter and my wife as I can at that time. So I was like, let's figure out what I can do to pull myself away from this W-2 hustle that I got going on. So I spent after she was born, the next 4 months of my deployment, basically all my free time, figuring out how do I make money that isn't directly tied my time to it. So real estate was the avenue I chose. I got back July 2020, and I had my first door under contract by August 2020, and first duplex was closed in October. Pretty quickly after that, picked up another duplex 2 months later, and then a 10 unit 5 months after that. So kind of fully jumped in, figuring it out as I go. So.
Hey, man, that's great. You know, listen, 18 listeners, 18 doors in 2.5 years. That get a boom right there, right? You know, one thing that I really love that you said is, you know, everything that you do is going to somehow, some way revert back to spending more time with your family. So, but just sticking in this 18 doors, right? You said that you purchased, you know, a couple duplexes within a couple months from one another, right? You know, I think one of the biggest issues that people run into is capital. Mm-hmm. You know, so I guess, can you talk a little bit about those deals and how did you fund them?
Absolutely. So this was the good and bad of getting deployed in the Army, is I wasn't spending any money over there. So the first 2 deals were self-funded. Everything, I basically came back. So my wife moved in with her parents because she was pregnant while I was gone. And then we came back and we pretty much just took some of that money I made from our deployment that we'd saved up, and that's where I bought those first 2 properties from. I mean, pretty much after that, everything I've done has been, how do I minimize my capital? So like I'll kind of jump past the 10 unit because it's not as important as my first short-term rental was actually my primary house when I moved. So I wanted to kind of jump into the short-term rental game, but I didn't have the capital at that point to be able to just go buy another property. So I knew I was moving. So what I did is actually we moved out of our house 4 or 5 months early. And I was like, hey, I know my parents live near me where our current house is. My wife's parents live where we're going to go. So let's just try the short-term rental thing. If it doesn't work, I mean, at that point, it's a couple $100, maybe even a couple thousand. Like we're talking under $1,500 to change our primary residence into a short-term rental. And it booked basically the first night I put it on Airbnb, and somebody wanted to show up 48 hours later. So I was packing up my entire house, basically bought everything that weekend, and someone showed up 48 hours after I listed it. And then my wife and I moved in. Honestly, we moved to both of our parents' house. We basically would spend 2 weeks with one of them, drive from Illinois to Ohio, spend 2 weeks with them, drive back. And that's, I mean, what the takeaway was is how do I get in and test the short-term rental thing out? Because I'd only owned long-term rentals, and I wasn't really sure if the short-term rental thing was going to work. So for $1,500, I was able to test it out, and it worked. So it basically set me farther down that path. But anything to basically minimize that initial upfront cost and try something out is I like to anything in that regards I can try out.
I mean, like, wow. Somebody just jumping into short-term rentals, moving out, kind of, you have your wife on board as far as moving your family back and forth, all for an experiment to see if this is actually something that's going to work. So, I mean, that's amazing in itself. I think most people have this very low threshold for like discomfort. And so, one, I respect that a lot. Just the fact that you took action, but two, that you actually just jump straight into it and then you're doing it and seeing how it goes. And I guess, knowing about your story, I kind of want to dig into a couple of things. So you got the short-term rental. So like walk us through like how that process went, and even like pivoting and like how you pivoted, because I know within your portfolio, I've heard of like short-term rental, long-term rental, midterm, apartment, sort of investing. So, and you've been able to do it successfully. So maybe we can break it down to like each niche maybe, and all the pivoting that you've done.
So a lot of those good and bad actually end up being the same thing. So I'll just walk through a little bit more of that short-term rental story. So I jumped in full force into that short-term rental and was giving it a shot. And then I made a rookie mistake of not fully checking in the laws of what was supposed to be happening. So after I got smart on that, I quickly converted it to a midterm rental because it had to be a 30-day minimum. So it got me taking action on the first thing, that I got a short-term rental. I was moving forward and on board that this worked, and then being able to quickly pivot to a furnished midterm rental, I think kind of saved that piece of my portfolio. And that's why I talk so much about midterm rentals now, is because I've been able to take what would have been basically a failed short-term rental and flip it to a midterm rental. And honestly, it's worked really well. It's been booked. I mean, I'm talking days that it hasn't been booked as a midterm rental, not weeks or months, which is pretty cool. And I pretty much just use Airbnb for that one solely, which is awesome.
So listen, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I just want to like follow up on that. I mean, I think that's super amazing that you're able to pivot and then get somebody in, and then you just use the Airbnb platform in order to get somebody into the midterm rental. And you see it's become such an emerging like space, and it's become the new sexy thing, like the midterm rentals. And so like, what's your thoughts on that, and like where midterm rentals is even going?
So I think it's going to continue to progress in a strong manner. I think everyone thinks of midterm rentals as like it's just traveling nurses, and I haven't had a single traveling nurse in my midterm rental. I mean, I had some students that were, I guess you could call them travelers. They were basically on clinicals, so they were there 13 weeks. I had another family that came from Florida that has stayed 3 months. They've extended an extra month already. They've already asked to come back 6 months down the road for another 3-month block. So it's not just the what do I call it, traveling nurses that everyone thinks is the midterm rental. I think there's a lot more people that are looking to travel places for multiple weeks at a time. And I don't think that's going away. I think especially as more and more people move towards like a purely remote work environment, they realize that they don't have to sit at home to remote work. They can go wherever to remote work. And if they have a strong internet connection, that's a quick tip I have for all your listeners. Like if you have a midterm rental, put your internet speeds right on there. Do the speed test on Google, take a screenshot of that and post it on your listing. And I've had multiple people be like, oh, because of that, or because of I have 2 monitors and a desk there. Like if it's a setup where they can have a work environment, they're happy to go stay there for weeks at a time.
Oh, that's great. Hey, just sticking there and talking about, amenities, so you have some short-term rentals and now you have some midterm rentals. I guess, are there a difference that you notice with amenities that's required for the midterm rental versus the short-term rental?
So most of the amenities I focus on are not, like you kind of have your standard ones that are like your short-term rentals. You kind of want that, what do they call it? Like the water object where it's a pool or a hot tub, that type of stuff. In midterm rentals, that's not as important. A lot of the main pieces and drivers that I focus on, because most of like my midterm rentals in a suburb, I focus on family friendly and pet friendly. And those 2 things, I'll have in a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, 2 people will show up, but because they have a pet, they'll drive 20 miles from Chicago to stay there, or they'll pay the $3,000 a month to stay at this midterm rental for 2 people because they have a pet. But when I say that, I mean, my focus for like family friendly is I have child locks on all of my cabinets. I have gates for the stairs so that kids don't fall down them. Like things that till you have a kid, you don't realize are important. But when you do, and you go to an Airbnb, it's so important. Not having cords just hang out from random things that kids can grab on. Like all those things, like as a parent, I think about, and I make sure that my midterm and short-term rentals have those, because then I can say, hey, this is family friendly, where if like if you're parents, you stayed at a short-term rental and it's like, this is not family friendly.
That's so true. I mean, that's so true. And when you think about like, you've clearly like identified your avatar or like your target niche, and you got the digital nomad and you have like the families and just like you said, yeah, I mean, I go to short-term rentals or stay at them all the time, different cities, and they're rarely ever kid friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, even like the pets component on the midterm rental space, you don't see a lot. I tested out a midterm rental just in my house. So I try to rent out a room, and a lot of people that reached out that didn't have housing were people that had a pet or had a kid. And it seems like there is a big opportunity there if you can kind of help that little type of niche.
Mm-hmm.
There's huge demand. So that's pretty cool that that you have that. So you did that. Like, talk about the apartment stuff. Like, so how do you even? You're like, okay, I did midterm rental, short-term rental, I killed it. Now I'm just gonna go straight into like multifamily. So walk us through like that process.
Yeah, it actually it happened almost in reverse. So I was a big component or proponent of multifamily because to me, like a long-term rental, if you own a single family house and you don't have someone there, you have no funding coming in. Where multifamily, you can start kind of splitting that up. And it works similar in a short-term rental fashion because you can have people there only a couple weeks or a couple days out of the time. So you're making a little bit of money towards that mortgage. So I like splitting up that risk. And that's why I actually moved from some of my smaller 2-unit like duplexes to having short-term rentals as well. But it also pushed me towards multifamily and the 10-unit. And I'm actually in the process of building a team for syndicating larger units. But really, I like the aspects of being able to diversify in real estate as well as be able to minimize risk. And that's kind of where the larger multifamily minimizes that risk in my mind. But I also realize that I don't have all this time. So I like to use teams and systems to create a lot of this stuff. So the short-term rental thing, that was easy for me as a software engineer because I could automate so much of that even managing a couple on my own isn't so time intensive that I couldn't do it. Obviously the setup process takes time. Something goes wrong, it takes a little bit of time, but like the day-to-day with the tools of automation make it very easy to do. There's a lot of good ones out there. I mean, whether it's Price Labs, Turno, Hospitable, the messaging one, like those are all good ones to me that make automating super easy to do and make it easy for your average person to manage a short-term rental. And to me, the cost of not paying someone to manage it for me at 20 to 40% was worth it. Where on a long-term rental, I don't manage any of mine because even those maintenance phone calls or dealing with tenants isn't worth the 6 to 8% that I could go pay someone to do it. So to me, it's a value of time there. And looking, kind of getting back to your original question of how do I move into multifamily, is I'm building a team around that because I don't want to do the day-to-day of everything. So I'm kind of standing up, hey, this is the criteria we're looking at, trying to find a couple of people to put into this place that want to do the same thing, that know we want to build a larger machine that in 4 or 5 years, we're consistently taking down deals and have a larger team around us to do this. So putting in a little bit of legwork now while I'm still young enough, hungry, and excited about all this. And my kids haven't got to the point of doing dance recitals yet or coaching or playing soccer or whatever. So like I'm okay putting in all this extra time now, knowing that in 2 to 3 years when I want to step away from the business, I can do that in a useful manner. So
That's great. That's great. And let's just stick here because, one of the things you started out with saying is that everything you do, you want to make sure you spend more time with your family.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that all through this episode because that's what I love, right? The post, okay? And, you also mentioned, a few applications out there where people should have that will help you automate a lot of your business where you can run it, yourself versus giving, that 30 to 40%, to a management company, right? And also you said you're building, these multifamilies. Now, I know you have a tech background and, AI these days is just like blowing us. I mean, mind blowing some of the things that go on. So are you using your tech background and this new wave of AI in any way, shape, or form to, I guess, automate or do anything within your real estate business?
So I'm going to say just starting on that track. So the initial piece of me starting out, I used almost no AI at all. The tech is everything I use already exists out there, and I'm cool with paying a subscription model to honestly any of these platforms that make my life easier. So whether it's Hospitable or Price Labs or Turno, I know they all get their cut, and I'm cool with that because I don't have to do all of the techie stuff that they do. And that's coming from a software background that I don't want to spend that time to do it. So I'm cool with paying for someone else to do that because for me, my end goal is to get more time with my family. So when it comes to AI, I think it will be extremely useful as businesses move forward, but I don't think it's something you need to know today to jump into real estate investing. I think if you want to grow massive portfolios and gain a ton of outside capital and build up big, large businesses, AI will become extremely important. But for your individual person trying to get into real estate, I think you could get into it without knowing anything about AI.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that's the way you were going or not, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think AI is definitely the future, and it's a great tool to have kind of available. And I guess somebody who's just getting started and they hear, somebody like you has 18 doors, like what advice would you give them to get started, even from like a mindset piece?
Yeah, so this is going to go back to kind of what I preach on all of my stuff is it's daily consistent action. So it doesn't have to be, hey, how do I go find $100,000 to put on a property? It's, well, let's break this down to the very initial piece of what do I want to invest in? And whether it's short-term, long-term, you have to pick what you want to invest in. And that's, really sitting down thinking about it, like 3-4 minutes, like you can do that in a single day, what you want to do. And then you could take the next day and say, hey, what market do I want to go into? And like, yeah, that's probably a much bigger question, but look at one market today. Hey, maybe I want to look at Orlando, Florida. And then you can start, say, hey, I picked something. Now I can go look at I don't want to talk to anybody yet because I'm still a little scared. Let me just get on Zillow. See what prices look like on Zillow. So you can keep breaking it down into very small tasks that you can do every day. And I mean, you can take that from where you are right now to actually buying a property of, hey, how do I go call a realtor today that they can start getting me listings? How do I call a bank? Maybe it's called one bank today, and you do that for 5 days in a row, and now you have 5 different banks you've talked to. So just break everything down into a couple minute task and do it daily versus I'm just going to work on my real estate portfolio on Saturday mornings. Well, you might be successful that way.
So can I interrupt you real quickly? So
yep.
I noticed on your social media, you have this checklist. So you talk about these. Can you just walk us through, like, I want to start that. So walk us through kind of like your process around that.
Yeah. So my checklist is actually something that I've kind of adapted a little bit from Brandon Turner and Bigger Pockets. They have their weekly planning board. So that's actually my board right behind me. So you have to do what works for you, and mine's a whiteboard. So I like the ability to wipe things off the board. It makes me really happy. So I basically, every Sunday, I basically put everything out into days of the week and when I'm going to do things. And then I realize that I try to accomplish way more than I'm ever going to get done. So I pick 4 things that are the most important things to me for that day to call that day really a success. So you'll see on there, one of them is always a workout for me because to me, I am a better husband, father. I think clearer when I get a workout in. It's just my time. It makes me happy. It gets my body in the right mindset. It gets my head in the right mindset. So like there's always a workout on there for me. The other ones are generally around some type of business related things that are pushing my real estate portfolio forward. And then the last one's oftentimes about family. But a lot of times I won't put my family directly on that checklist because that's a non-negotiable for me. So like sometimes the checklist you'll see, like if something family related comes up, I'll just put some X's on that checklist and I'm cool with it because my family is the most important thing to me. But the point of the checklist is really like, if there's 4 things that I'm going to accomplish today that will move my businesses forward or move my life forward, these are the 4 things.
That is super duper smart, and I'm happy that you shared that. Some things you mentioned earlier was just about, want me to ask, where can a person start, and having a checklist is one of the areas. I also, tell people, you need a niche in the strategy, right? Mm-hmm. Because, there's so many different avenues of real estate. You can flip. You can be a home seller. You can be a buy and holder. You can be a short-term rental individual. Well, you got to pick one, and you can't sit here and have your hand in all of those cookie jars. And you also got to pick a zip code, just like you mentioned, and study, learn that zip code, learn everything about it. Now, moving on to something that you mentioned this generational fire, right? And when I read that, honestly, the little hairs on the back of my neck kind of lift up. So I'm like, generational fire. I know what generational wealth means and how sexy that sounds, right? But generational fire, like educate us. What is that? Educate us on that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So to me, the standard FIRE term is financial independence, retire early. I know the retire early is not really for me. I like to my take on it is financial independence real estate because I like real estate. And I know I'm going to work forever just because I love it. I love what I do. But the point of generational FIRE is to be able to take the financial and money concepts that I'm learning today and how do I imprint those onto my kids. So like my 10-unit apartment complex that I bought is for my daughter. I ripped that straight out of Brandon Turner's concepts of buying properties for your kids. But I also know that it's not just this is a college fund for. This is for me to teach her how to run a business, how do you buy real estate? How is your property doing? And I'll have one for each of my kids and they can compare them when they're getting older and be like, oh, my property made this much money this month. but it's to be able to teach them a lot of the financial and business concepts that I never learned in school. And whether our education system uses those or not, it doesn't, to me, I don't want to bank on that. I want to be able to teach my kids that. So if I can teach them a lot of the financial concepts that I had to learn on my own, and I'm actually teaching them, that's generational fire for me. And then obviously my focus is me and my family, but if I can also help other people do the same thing and provide these concepts to their kids or even to them if they don't know them, I might as well. Like that's just, it's a win in my book to be able to teach someone else to do this. And at the end of the day, it's all practice for me to teach my daughter and my son how to do this.
Hey, can you just tell us what that fire means one more time? Because I didn't get the opportunity to write that down.
Absolutely. So fire is financial independence, retire early, but I like to call it financial independence real estate just because everything I do is going to be focused on real estate. But yeah, the standard fire acronym is financial independence, retire early.
I like the twist on it. I mean, I like the twist with the real estate. So I think I'm going to steal that from you and start using that moving forward. So yeah, that's a good one. So, I like how you incorporated a lot of, just things that you've learned from studying from, you're quoting a lot of like Brandon Turner. So like somebody who wants to just, maybe get into this financial independence sort of mindset, is there any sort of literature that you recommend or podcast that you think is a good starting point for somebody that just kind of wants to dive in?
Yeah, there's actually a couple good ones. It kind of depends where you want to go. So if you're looking for real estate specific ones, the Bigger Pockets Rookie podcast has kind of been my go-to for that. If you're looking more for just financial independence ones, Choose FI has been my other go-to. They're the ones that got me started on the financial independence movement in 2017. So those are kind of my two go-to. If you're trying to get a little bit more advanced, there's a couple other real estate ones. There's the standard Bigger Pockets one. If you're looking for self-storage income's another good one. Not a route I've gone down, but I listened to a couple of their podcasts and they're pretty useful in regards to the business and setting up entity side of the house too. So two other ones were The Mad Fientist is another good one. That's more financial independence focused. Yeah, I would say those are the main ones. A lot of the financial independence community focuses on their initial focus is a lot on decreasing your expenses. And that's the one thing that I don't agree with as much. I like to focus on how do I increase my income? And that's just something where if you listen to these podcasts, you'll see a lot of how do we save. And I think that's good starting out, but at some point you got to flip that switch into, I can't save more than I currently am. How do I start expanding the other side of this equation and making more money?
So Kyle, it sounds like there's one more podcast that you didn't mention, the Define Your Freedom podcast, I believe.
Is it? I know. That was on my list. I was saving them for the end.
No worries. Hey, listen, I think that, we share a lot of the same goals because, like my reason to, do real estate was to make sure that I'm able to provide an education down to my son, right? Because truthfully, I don't know what the kid's going to want to do. Do I want him to do real estate? Yes, I want a lot for him to do real estate, but the things that I want to provide is how to talk to attorneys, right? How to sit here and negotiate, how to talk to accountants, how to read a P&L, because regardless to what you do or what business you go into, these are just things that you're going to just need to know how to do. So I take my son along with me, which he's 10. He's like, don't want to be there, right? But, to the accountant office, I'm doing my accountant work and I'm letting them listen on the speaker when I'm speaking to, the real estate attorney and what they're saying, just for him to sit there and take that in. So I guess, what other things that you are doing that is securing your future for you to be, at those baseball games and at those recitals, because you mentioned that earlier?
Yeah, so my kids are still 7 months and almost 3 years, so they're still on the younger side. But honestly, it's pushing. I mean, even my W-2 job, so I still work a full-time W-2 job. I've moved it from how do I sit at a desk and I used to work on like classified stuff. How do I sit where I can't take work home from me, but it means I have to be in the office and I've jumped jobs twice already to give me more and more flexibility. Where my current position, I work remote 100% of the time from negotiation at the very beginning. This is what I wanted to do. And the other part is like, there's only so many meetings during the day. And as long as I'm not on a meeting, I don't actually have to do work then. So like I do work after my kids go to bed. I do work before my kids go to bed. I can do work on the weekends. So like in a given standard 5-day work week, I put in maybe 30 hours, but I put in the other time on the weekends because if my kids are doing something or during nap time, I always work during those times because that's not with them. But I've made sure and set my life up, and it took me many years, probably a good 7 years, to be able to jump jobs strategically to get to the point where I found a position that allows me the flexibility. And that's the most important thing about my current job is the flexibility of when I actually have to clock in, because I can go look at real estate on a Tuesday at noon if I want to, or I can see a house on Friday at 10 a.m. as long as there's not a work meeting there. And I luckily strategically move my work meetings around that I can go do that. And whether it's real estate or with my family, like I'm there every day my kids wake up. I'm there when my kids go to bed. I pick them up from school. Like those are the most important things to me. And I can flex the rest of my time around that.
Man, I love that. I think that's, you clearly have demonstrated, like people say, oh, family is my priority. But then when you actually see where their time is spent, it's not with their family. And so, you clearly are like spending, you say like my priority, my non-negotiable is my family. And this is how I constructed my life to make sure that that is exactly what I'm doing. So, I think that's super amazing. So maybe you can even just break down for somebody who wants to do that. What do they need to do? How do they like break down their tasks or how do they assess like where their priorities are to kind of construct a life? Let's say they want to be like you, like, they hear your story and they're like, oh, this is awesome. Like I need to spend more time with my family. What are some steps that they can take?
Yeah. So I think the first step, whether it's you want to be with your family or not, is finding, and I call it your why. So like the true meaningful reason of why you want to do something, and spend a real amount of time. And it took me a coach and multiple hours to figure out and like really sit down and be like, this is my why. And to me, it took me a long time because it is so rock solid in the foundation of what I am that if I'm tired, but I need to analyze one more property, it's worth it to me because that's not like I get to spend time. I get to wake up and see my kids the next day. 10 more minutes before I go to bed is fine. And then the other side of it is like, once you have your why, start scheduling your day around that. So if you want to go buy your first property, actually set aside time on your calendar for a 15-minute block. If that's all you can do at lunch, hey, 15 minutes at lunch, put in your calendar, I will work on my real estate business for these 15 minutes. And then actually stick by it in your calendar. So like I schedule everything in my calendar. I have real estate time slots. I put my family time slots in there because then nothing gets in the way of them. My work time slots, all of that. But a good first step is how to like set aside 15 minutes and actually use that 15 minutes every day to move whatever it is forward. And if it's really, I want to spend more time with my family, put that 15 minutes in your calendar and go spend that time with your family and slowly increase that time until you get to where you want it to be.
That's awesome. I don't know if I'm coining this or not, which I'm not, but I'm gonna act like I am. Right? Just bear with me, guys. Time blocking, right? And sometimes, for me, I get away from it and I got to jump right back to it. So it's two important things that I like to do, which is one, limit my distractions. Which, I got this little iWatch thing that buzz every single time, notifications and stuff like that. Take this watch off, right? And I also take, obviously the phone and I put it outside the room. And I set a 50-minute timer, right? And I work for, 50 minutes, and I give myself that break for the 10 minutes or whatever to sit there, feed that social media bug or whatever, you have to do. And it's interesting that you talk about kind of fitting your kids in your time because, I was talking to Omid earlier where my son's 10. He likes to play soccer in the house. He got like these nets, in the living room going on. He took over the living room. My wife, not too happy about that. And, so I have to actually set time aside, because I think he'll kill me in my sleep if I sit here and don't play soccer with him, during the time. So we play like 2 or 3 games before he goes to bed, so that time blocking, in your why, right, factoring in what is important. So me playing soccer with my son is important and factor that in, to my day to make sure that happened. Thank you for sharing that. But hey, Kyle, listen, we could talk to you forever, but let me ask you a question. What does find your freedom mean to you?
Yeah, so finding my freedom, it means being able to coach my kids when it gets to their sports, go to dance recitals. But when I say that, I mean to be fully present there. So not thinking about work, not thinking about if I have to answer a phone call, not thinking about how much the celebration dinner is going to cost me after they win, but being fully present without having to think of, hey, is money an issue with me right now? Is this work phone call an issue with me right now? Like, that's what finding my freedom is not just being with them, but being wholly and fully present with them, that there's no other distractions in my way right then.
I love that. It's, I guess, for me, it's when somebody wants to connect with you, they want to be present. So where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so the best place to connect with me is on Instagram. My handle is @creatinggenerationalfire. And then I do have a website the website's creatinggenerationalfire.com. So those are the 2 best spots to get a hold of me.
Dude, I'm not going to lie, man. I really, really, really enjoy this generational fire. You know what I mean? So if you happen to see it on my page, I'm going to have to give you like a shout out at the end. You know what I mean? From my guy, Kyle Healy, that generational fire is awesome. But one of the things we like to do at the end of the show is we like to sit here in the show with the biggest boom that a human can make, right? So, what we do a countdown 1, 2, 3, and then in a uniform manner, we bring the boom. So tell me, fellas, let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
All right. For listeners that can't see, I got to sit up a little bit because I got to get ready. All right, let's go. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Check this out. Listen, we just had Kyle Healy here. Once again, we don't have guests on our show. We have friends. And that generational fire, you better get down with it because that is where it's at. All right. Now, we always have something for you. And we just want to give you something that's going to help you on your journey. So go to this easily downloadable findyourfreedom.com/freedom kit. Download it. Believe me, you're going to want it on your journey. Once again, that's findyourfreedom.com/freedom kit. Now, listen, if you want to hear more and more episodes like this, we need you to listen and leave an honest 5-star review. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you share this, not just with your better half or your friends, but share it with your coworkers, your mother, your sister, your brother, your aunt, your uncle, your niece, your nephew. Hey, just take the darn link and send it to everybody in your contacts. All right. Until the next episode of Find Your Freedom, we talk to you soon. Peace.
Thanks for listening to Find Your Freedom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're at it, please help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review and sharing the podcast with friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, get out there and find your freedom.